The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Fox News studio, casting long shadows across the polished floors where Dana Perino had walked countless times before. For most people watching at home, she was the composed, political commentator they saw on their screens. Articulate, professional, always ready with the right words at the right moment. But this particular Tuesday morning felt different. Though Dana couldn't quite put her finger on why, she had arrived at the studio earlier than usual, her coffee still steaming in the travel mug she carried everywhere. The familiar routine of preparation, reviewing notes, checking her appearance, going through the day's talking points, should have felt comforting. Instead, there was a restlessness in her spirit that she couldn't shake. It was the kind of feeling that whispered that something significant was about to happen, though she had no logical reason to believe it. Dana had always been someone who noticed the small details others might miss. Perhaps it came from her years in political communications, where every word mattered and every gesture could be interpreted a dozen different ways. Or maybe it was simply who she was, someone who paid attention to the world around her, who saw people not just as faces in a crowd, but as individuals carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own hopes. As she walked through the bustling corridors of the studio building, she observed the usual morning symphony of activity. Producers hurried past with clipboards and urgent expressions, makeup artists prepared their stations with practiced efficiency, and security guards nodded their familiar greetings. Everyone had their role to play in the complex dance of live television, and Dana had been part of this choreography for years. But today, something felt different about the rhythm of it all. In her dressing room, Dana opened her purse to retrieve her notes and found herself looking at the small, worn Bible she always carried with her. It wasn't an expensive edition. The leather cover was soft with age, and the pages showed the gentle wear of frequent reading. Her grandmother had given it to her years ago, and it had been her constant companion through political campaigns, White House briefings, career changes, and personal challenges. The Bible had seen her through some of the most difficult moments of her life. During her time as White House press secretary, when the weight of representing an entire administration felt overwhelming, she would find quiet moments to read a verse or two, grounding herself in something larger than the political storms swirling around her. When she faced criticism or doubt, when the cameras felt too bright and the questions too sharp, this small book had been her anchor. It held more than just words on pages. It held her faith, her values, and her reminder that every person she encountered was worthy of dignity and respect. In a world that often felt divided by politics and ideology, the Bible reminded her of the fundamental truths that connected all human beings: the need for love, for hope, for someone to see them as valuable. Dana carefully placed the Bible back in her purse, not knowing that this would be the last morning she would carry it there. The show went smoothly, as it usually did. Dana discussed political developments with her co-hosts, offered analysis on recent events, and engaged in the kind of thoughtful commentary that had made her a respected voice in political media. But even as she spoke about policy and politics, part of her mind kept wandering to that feeling of anticipation, as if the universe was preparing something she couldn't yet see. After the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, Dana gathered her things and prepared to leave. She had lunch plans with a friend, nothing particularly special or out of the ordinary. It was the kind of day that would typically blend into the comfortable routine of her professional life, forgotten among the hundreds of other similar days. As she walked toward the elevator, Dana noticed Aria Hawkins from the production team, struggling with an armload of equipment cases. Aria was relatively new to the team, always eager to help, but sometimes overwhelmed by the fast pace of live television. Dana had watched her over the past few months, noting how hard she worked and how she always stayed late to make sure everything was perfect for the next day's show. "Need a hand with those?" Dana asked, stopping to help. Arya looked up, surprised that someone of Dana's stature would offer to help with such a mundane task. "Oh, Ms. Perino, thank you, but I can manage. I know you must have somewhere important to be." "Nowhere more important than helping a colleague," Dana replied, taking one of the heavier cases. "And please, call me Dana." As they walked together toward the storage area, Arya mentioned that she was planning to grab lunch from a food truck outside the building. "There's this amazing sandwich truck that parks right outside on Tuesdays. The owner is this elderly man who makes the most incredible food, but I think business has been slow lately." Dana filed this information away, though she wasn't sure why it seemed significant at the time. After helping Arya with the equipment, Dana made her way outside the building. The New York sidewalk buzzed with the usual midday energy, people hurrying to lunch meetings, tourists consulting maps, delivery drivers navigating through the crowd. The city had a pulse all its own, and Dana had learned to appreciate both its energy and its anonymity. That's when she saw him. The food truck Arya had mentioned was parked at the corner, its colorful awning providing a small patch of shade on the busy sidewalk. Behind the serving window stood a man who appeared to be in his 70s, his face weathered but kind, his movements deliberate and careful as he prepared orders for the small line of customers. But it was what Dana noticed next that made her pause. Sitting on the sidewalk near the food truck, partially hidden by a newspaper stand, was a figure that most people hurried past without a second glance. He was a homeless man, probably in his 40s, wearing clothes that had seen better days and carrying his possessions in a worn backpack and a couple of plastic bags. His hair was unkempt, his face bore the marks of someone who had spent too many nights outdoors, and his posture spoke of exhaustion and resignation. What struck Dana most wasn't his appearance. She had seen homeless individuals throughout the city countless times. It was the way he was looking at the food truck. There was longing in his expression, but also a dignity that prevented him from approaching. He sat quietly, not asking for anything, not bothering anyone, simply existing in a space that most people treated as if he weren't there at all. Dana watched as people walked past him, some averting their eyes, others stepping a little wider. To avoid getting too close, she observed office workers checking their phones, tourists taking photos of the nearby buildings, and street vendors calling out to potential customers. The homeless man remained invisible to most of them, just another part of the urban landscape that people had learned to look past, but Dana couldn't look past him. There was something about the way he sat there, maintaining his dignity despite his circumstances, that reminded her of a fundamental truth she had always believed. Every person has a story, every individual has value, and everyone deserves to be seen as more than their worst moment or their current situation. She found herself thinking about her grandmother, the woman who had given her the Bible she carried. Her grandmother had lived through the Great Depression, had known what it meant to worry about where the next meal would come from, and had always taught Dana that prosperity was not a measure of worth. The measure of a person, her grandmother used to say, is not what they have, but how they treat others, especially those who can do nothing for them in return. Dana's lunch plans suddenly seemed less important than they had moments before. She approached the food truck, where the elderly owner, whose name tag read Vincent, greeted her with a warm smile. Vincent Foster had the kind of face that spoke of years of hard work and simple pleasures. His truck was meticulously clean, and the aroma coming from his small kitchen was absolutely amazing. "What can I get for you today, miss?" Vincent asked, his voice carrying a slight accent that Dana couldn't quite place. Dana ordered a sandwich for herself, but as Vincent began preparing it, she found her gaze drifting back to the homeless man. "Vincent," she said quietly, "do you know that gentleman over there?" Vincent followed her gaze and nodded slowly. "Elijah Vincent. He's been coming around this corner for a few weeks now. Never asks for anything, never causes any trouble. Just sits there quietly. I've offered him food a few times, but he always says he doesn't have money to pay, and he won't accept charity." "His name is Elijah Vincent?" Dana asked, noting the shared surname. "Just a coincidence, I think," Vincent said with a gentle smile. "But maybe that's why I notice him more than I might otherwise. Same last name, but very different circumstances." Dana felt that stirring in her spirit again, stronger now. Sometimes, the most significant moments in life announce themselves not with fanfare, but with a quiet insistence that this, right here, right now, is where you need to pay attention. "What's his story?" she asked. Vincent continued preparing her sandwich as he spoke. "I don't know all of it, but from what I can tell, Elijah used to have a job, maybe even a family. Something happened, could have been anything really. Job loss, medical bills, family problems, mental health struggles. You know how quickly things can change for people. One day you're getting by, and the next day you're not." Dana nodded, understanding more than Vincent might have realized. She had seen enough of life and politics to know that the distance between stability and crisis was often much smaller than people wanted to believe. Economic downturns, health emergencies, family tragedies, any number of circumstances could disrupt a life in ways that were difficult to recover from. "He seems like a good man," Vincent continued. "Polite, respectful, never asks customers for money, never bothers anyone, just sits there with his books." "Books?" Dana asked. "He reads," Vincent explained. "Always has a book or two with him. Sometimes I see him writing in a notebook. Makes me think he's educated, you know? Probably had a different life before whatever brought him here." Dana's sandwich was ready, but she found herself reluctant to leave. There was something about this moment, about this intersection of lives, that felt important in a way she couldn't yet understand. As she paid for her sandwich, Dana made a decision that surprised even her. "Vincent, would you mind preparing another sandwich? I'd like to buy one for Elijah." Vincent's face lit up with approval. "I think that's a wonderful idea. What kind would you like me to make for him?" "Something good," Dana said. "Whatever you think he might enjoy." While Vincent prepared the second sandwich, Dana found herself thinking about the small Bible in her purse. It had been her companion for so long, her source of comfort and guidance through challenging times. But maybe, she thought, it was meant to comfort someone else today. The idea seemed to come from somewhere beyond her own reasoning. She wasn't the type of person who made impulsive gestures, especially not with something as personal and meaningful as her grandmother's Bible. But the feeling was growing stronger, more insistent, as if this moment had been orchestrated by forces she couldn't see. When the second sandwich was ready, Dana took both meals and walked over to where Elijah sat. Up close, she could see more details that spoke to his humanity. The careful way he had arranged his possessions. The book he was reading was a collection of poetry, and despite his circumstances, he had made an effort to keep himself as clean as possible. "Excuse me," Dana said gently. "I'm Dana. I bought an extra sandwich and wondered if you might like it." Elijah looked up at her with surprise and what might have been a flicker of suspicion. People didn't usually approach him with kindness, and he had learned to be cautious. "I appreciate the offer," he said quietly, his voice educated and articulate, confirming Vincent's observation. "But I can't pay you for it." "I'm not asking you to pay," Dana replied. "I'm just offering to share lunch with a fellow human being." There was something in her tone, a genuine warmth without any hint of condescension or pity, that seemed to reach Elijah. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted the sandwich with a quiet, "Thank you." Dana sat down on the curb beside him, ignoring the fact that her professional attire wasn't exactly designed for sidewalk dining. "Do you mind if I join you? Eating alone isn't nearly as nice as eating with company." Elijah seemed taken aback by her willingness to sit with him, to treat him as an equal, rather than as someone to be helped from a distance. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know I don't have to," Dana replied. "I want to." As they sat together, sharing their sandwiches on a busy New York sidewalk, Dana felt that stirring in her spirit reached a crescendo. This was why she had felt that sense of anticipation all morning. This was the moment she had been unconsciously preparing for. And in her purse, her grandmother's Bible seemed to be waiting for its own moment of purpose. As Dana and Elijah sat together on the sidewalk, the rhythm of the city continued around them. Cars honking, people hurrying past, the distant sound of construction mixing with street vendors calling out their wares. But in their small space beside the food truck, a different kind of time seemed to unfold, slower and more deliberate, as if the universe had carved out this moment specifically for them. Elijah unwrapped his sandwich with careful, almost reverent movements. Dana noticed that his hands, though weathered and showing the effects of life on the streets, were steady and clean. There was something about the way he handled the food that spoke of gratitude without desperation, appreciation without the frantic hunger she might have expected. "This is really good," he said after taking a bite, his voice carrying genuine surprise. "Vincent makes excellent food." "You know Vincent?" Dana asked, taking a bite of her own sandwich. "Not personally," Elijah replied, "but I've been watching his truck for a few weeks now. He's kind to his customers, patient with people who take a long time to decide what they want. You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat others when they think no one important is watching." Dana found herself impressed by the observation. In her years in politics and media, she had learned the same lesson. That character was most often revealed in unguarded moments, in how people behaved when cameras weren't rolling. And there were no immediate benefits to be gained from kindness. "What brings you to this corner?" she asked gently, not wanting to pry, but genuinely curious about his story. Elijah was quiet for a moment, and Dana wondered if she had overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice thoughtful rather than defensive. "The library," he said, pointing. "Down the street. There's a branch library about 3 blocks that way. They have comfortable chairs, and they don't ask questions if you spend the day there reading. Plus, they have computers if you need to look for work or try to figure out what comes next." Dana nodded, understanding the unspoken reality that the library served as more than just a place to borrow books for someone in Elijah's situation. It was shelter, refuge, a place where he could maintain some semblance of normalcy and dignity. "What do you like to read?" she asked, gesturing toward the book of poetry beside him. Elijah's face brightened slightly, the first real spark of enthusiasm she had seen from him. "Poetry, mostly. Some philosophy. Literature. I used to teach high school English before." He paused, the sentence hanging in the air like an unfinished thought. "Before what?" Dana asked softly. Elijah set down his sandwich and looked out at the stream of people walking past. "Before life happened, I guess. My wife got sick. Cancer. The medical bills ate through our savings, then our credit, then everything else. I took time off work to care for her, and when she died, I found out the school district had to let me go due to budget cuts. They were sympathetic, but sympathy doesn't pay rent." Dana felt her heart constrict as she listened. This wasn't the story of someone who had made poor choices or given up on life. This was the story of someone who had been knocked down by circumstances that could happen to anyone. Illness, economic pressures, the domino effect of trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, and meant it completely. "Thank you," Elijah replied. "Losing her was the hardest part. Everything else, the job, the house, ending up here, those are just consequences. But losing Emma, that changed everything about who I thought I was." The way he said his wife's name, with such tenderness even in grief, told Dana volumes about the kind of man Elijah had been before circumstances stripped away the external markers of his identity. The love in his voice was still fresh, still raw, suggesting that his loss was relatively recent. "How long has it been?" she asked. 8 months since she died, 4 months since I lost the house, 2 months since I ran out of options and ended up here. He spoke these facts matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Dana could hear the weight of each milestone in his voice. "Do you have family? Friends who might be able to help?" Elijah shook his head slowly. "Emma and I never had children. Her family never really accepted me, and mine, well, let's just say they made it clear that I made my own choices and needed to live with the consequences. Some people think that if you're homeless, you must have done something to deserve it." Dana felt a flash of anger at the family who had abandoned him, but she kept her voice gentle. "That's not true, and I think you know that." "Most days I know that," Elijah admitted. "But when you're sitting on a sidewalk, watching people avoid eye contact with you, when you're trying to figure out where you're going to sleep safely tonight, when you're wondering if this is just who you are now, some days it's harder to remember." The honesty in his words struck Dana deeply. She thought about her own life, the security of her career, her home, her routine. She thought about how quickly things could change, how thin the line was between stability and crisis for more people than anyone wanted to acknowledge. "What keeps you going?" she asked. Elijah picked up the book of poetry and turned it over in his hands. "Reading helps. It reminds me that I'm still the same person inside, even if everything else has changed. And I guess I keep thinking that Emma wouldn't want me to give up. She always said that every ending is also a beginning, that you just have to be patient enough to see what's being born from what's dying." Dana felt tears prick at her eyes. Here was a man who had lost everything, sitting on a city sidewalk with all his possessions in a backpack, and he was talking about hope and new beginnings with more grace than most people showed when their coffee order was wrong. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman," Dana said. "She was." Elijah's voice was soft with memory. "She used to say that the most important thing about a person wasn't what they believed, but how their beliefs made them treat other people. She was always looking for ways to help, always seeing the best in everyone." As he spoke, Dana felt that familiar stirring in her spirit intensify. She thought about her grandmother's Bible in her purse, about the values it represented, about the teachings that called for exactly the kind of compassion Emma had apparently embodied. "Elijah," she said slowly, "I want to ask you something, and please don't feel obligated to say yes. I have something with me that has been very important to me, and I have this strong feeling that it might be meant for you." Elijah looked at her with curiosity and perhaps a touch of wariness. "What do you mean?" Dana reached into her purse and carefully pulled out her grandmother's Bible. The worn leather cover caught the afternoon light, and she could see Elijah's eyes widen slightly as he recognized what it was. "This belonged to my grandmother," Dana explained. "She gave it to me years ago, and it's been with me through some of the most challenging times in my life. But today, sitting here with you, listening to your story, I feel like maybe it's supposed to be with you now." Elijah stared at the Bible, his expression unreadable. "I couldn't accept something that personal," he said finally. "That belongs to your family. My grandmother always told me that the most important things in life are meant to be shared," Dana replied. "She said that love and faith only grow when you give them away. And something about this moment, about meeting you, about your story, it feels like this is exactly what she would have wanted." She held the Bible out toward him, and she could see his hands trembling slightly as he looked at it. "I don't know if I still believe Elijah said quietly. After everything that's happened, after losing Emma, after ending up here, I don't know if I have faith anymore. Maybe that's exactly when faith is most needed, Dana suggested gently. Not when everything is going well and belief is easy, but when life has knocked you down and you need something to help you remember who you really are. Elijah reached out slowly and took the Bible in his hands. It seemed small and fragile in his weathered fingers, but Dana could see something shift in his expression as he held it. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Dana considered the question seriously. Why was she doing this? It wasn't calculated or planned. It wasn't for publicity or recognition. She hadn't even thought about the fact that there might be cameras around, that this moment might be captured and shared. It was simply something that felt right, something that felt necessary, as if her entire morning had been leading to this exchange. "Because I think we're supposed to take care of each other," she said finally. "Because you remind me that any of us could be where you are. And I hope that if I ever found myself in that position, someone would see me as a person worth caring about. And because my grandmother always said that when you have something that might help someone else, you don't ask why, you just say yes." Elijah opened the Bible carefully, as if it might crumble in his hands. The pages fell open to a passage in Psalms, and Dana watched as his eyes scanned the familiar words. She couldn't see exactly what verse he was reading, but she could see the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the way his breathing seemed to deepen. "There's something else," Dana said, reaching into her purse again. She pulled out a business card and a pen, writing her personal phone number on the back. "This is my number. If you ever need anything, a meal, someone to talk to, help figuring out next steps, please call me. I mean that." Elijah took the card and looked at it, then at her, then back at the Bible in his hands. "I don't understand why you're being so kind to a stranger." "Because you're not really a stranger," Dana replied. "You're a teacher who loved his wife and took care of her when she was sick. You're someone who reads poetry and still believes in new beginnings even when life has been cruel. You're exactly the kind of person my grandmother would have wanted me to help, and exactly the kind of person who deserves kindness." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both of them processing what had just happened. Around them, the city continued its relentless pace, but their small corner felt removed from all of that, peaceful in a way that seemed almost impossible given their urban surroundings. "Dana," Elijah said eventually, "can I ask what you do for work? You seem familiar, but I can't place where I might have seen you." Dana smiled. "I work in television, political commentary mostly. Nothing too exciting." Elijah studied her face more carefully. "Wait, are you Dana Perino from Fox News?" "I am," Dana confirmed, curious about his reaction. "I used to watch your show sometimes before." He gestured vaguely at his current situation. "You always seemed different from other political commentators. More human, I guess. Less interested in scoring points and more interested in actually understanding issues." "Thank you," Dana said, touched by the observation. "I've always believed that politics is ultimately about people with real problems who need real solutions. It's easy to forget that when you're caught up in the daily battles of media and politics. And here you are, sitting on a sidewalk with a homeless man, giving away your grandmother's Bible," Elijah said, with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "I'd say that proves your priorities are in the right place." Dana felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I'd say that meeting you has reminded me what really matters." As they finished their sandwiches, Elijah carefully placed the Bible in his backpack, treating it with the reverence Dana had hoped he would. She could see that accepting the gift had been difficult for him. His pride had clearly taken a beating along with everything else in his life. But she could also see that it meant something to him, that it represented more than just a book. "What will you do for the rest of the day?" Dana asked, Head to the library, Elijah replied. Read for a while, maybe work on some writing. I've been keeping a journal, trying to process everything that's happened. Sometimes writing helps me make sense of things. That sounds like a good plan, Dana said. And Elijah, I meant what I said about calling me. Don't hesitate if you need anything. As they prepared to part ways, Elijah stood up and extended his hand to Dana. Thank you, he said simply, for the sandwich, for the conversation, for seeing me as a person instead of just this. He gestured at his appearance, his circumstances. Dana shook his hand firmly. Thank you for reminding me what really matters. They parted ways then, Dana heading back toward her office, Elijah walking in the direction of the library. But as Dana walked away, she found herself looking back over her shoulder, watching as Elijah carefully adjusted his backpack and walked with what seemed like a little more purpose than he'd had when she first saw him. She didn't know it yet, but their encounter had been captured by security cameras from the surrounding buildings. She didn't know that within hours the footage would be making its way around social media. She didn't know that this simple act of human kindness was about to reach millions of people and change both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. All she knew was that giving away her grandmother's Bible had felt like the most natural thing in the world, and that meeting Elijah Vincent had reminded her why she had gotten into public service in the first place. Not for the politics or the recognition, but for the chance to make a difference in real people's lives. As she walked back to her office, Dana felt lighter somehow, as if she had just participated in something much larger than herself. The feeling of anticipation she'd had all morning was gone, replaced by a deep sense of satisfaction and rightness. She had no idea that this was only the beginning of the story. The security camera mounted on the corner of the building had been recording everything, its silent electronic eye capturing what would soon become one of the most shared videos of the year. But neither Dana nor Elijah knew about the camera as they parted ways that afternoon, Dana walking back toward her office with a lightness in her step, Elijah heading toward the library with a worn Bible carefully tucked in his backpack and something that hadn't been there in months. A flicker of hope. The footage sat unnoticed on the security company's servers for several hours. Just another routine recording in a city where thousands of cameras captured millions of mundane moments. Every day. It might have remained there forever, archived and forgotten, if not for Oliver Barnes, a security technician who was reviewing the day's recordings as part of his regular duties. Oliver had been working security for 3 years, and most of his job involved fast-forwarding through hours of nothing. People walking, cars passing, the occasional minor incident that required documentation. But something about the interaction between the well-dressed woman and the homeless man made him pause and watch more carefully. He watched Dana approach Elijah with the sandwich. He watched them sit together on the sidewalk, talking like old friends. He watched as Dana pulled something from her purse, a book of some kind, and offered it to Elijah with obvious care and intention. Most remarkably, he watched two human beings connect across circumstances that usually kept people separated by invisible walls of discomfort and assumption. Oliver's girlfriend, Harper Sullivan, worked for a local news station, and when he got home that evening, he couldn't stop talking about what he'd seen. It was just different, he told Harper, as they sat in their small apartment, sharing takeout Chinese food. You see a lot of stuff on these cameras, people being rude to each other, ignoring people who need help, everyone just rushing past everyone else. But this woman, she didn't just give the guy food and walk away. She sat down with him. She talked to him like he mattered. Harper, who had spent years covering stories about human interest and social issues, felt her journalist instincts perk up. Do you know who the woman was? That's the thing, Oliver said, pulling up the footage on his laptop. I think it might be Dana Perino. You know, from Fox News? I wasn't sure at first, but the more I look at it, the more certain I am." Harper leaned in to watch the video, and as she did, she felt that familiar tingle that journalists get when they sense a story that matters. This wasn't just a celebrity doing something nice for publicity. There were no cameras, no publicity team, no obvious benefit to Dana. This was simply one human being recognizing another's humanity and responding with genuine compassion. "Oliver," Harper said quietly, "this is beautiful, but are you sure we should share it? It seems so personal, so private." Oliver had been wrestling with the same question. "I thought about that," he said. "But you know what? Maybe people need to see this. Maybe in a world where everyone's arguing about politics and taking sides about everything, people need to remember that we're all just human beings trying to get through life." Harper watched the video again, studying the body language, the genuine interaction, the way both people seemed transformed by the encounter. "If we share this, we need to do it right," she said, "not as gossip or celebrity news, but as a reminder of what kindness looks like." Meanwhile, across the city, Elijah was sitting in his usual corner of the library, the Bible open on the table. In front of him, the librarian Grace Freeman had noticed him over the past few weeks, always quiet, always respectful, always reading something substantial. She had wanted to approach him before, but hadn't been sure how to do so without seeming intrusive or condescending. Today, though, something was different about him. There was a calmness in his posture that hadn't been there before, and the book he was reading was clearly personal, rather than one borrowed from the library's collection. As Grace walked past his table during her evening rounds, she noticed him, writing in a small notebook, occasionally referring to the Bible beside him. The writing seemed to flow easily, as if the words were coming from somewhere deep inside him that had been waiting for the right moment to speak. "Excuse me?" Grace said softly, not wanting to startle him. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but you seem different today. More peaceful, I guess." Elijah looked up at her, and Grace was struck by the clarity in his eyes. She had seen that look before in people who had received unexpected grace, a mixture of gratitude, wonder, and renewed hope. "Something remarkable happened today," Elijah said simply. "Someone reminded me that I'm still human, still worthy of kindness, still connected to the rest of the world, even when it feels like I've fallen out of it completely." Grace felt her heart soften. In her 15 years as a librarian, she had seen all kinds of people seeking refuge in the quiet sanctuary of books and learning. She had watched people find solace in literature during difficult times, had seen how the written word could provide comfort when everything else seemed uncertain. "Would you like to tell me about it?" she asked. And so Elijah found himself sharing the story of his encounter with Dana, describing not just what had happened, but what it had meant to him. He told Grace about Emma, about the losses that had brought him to the streets, about the way hope had been slowly draining out of him until today. "She gave me her grandmother's Bible," he said, touching the worn cover gently. "But more than that, she gave me a few minutes of being seen as a person instead of a problem. She reminded me that I used to be a teacher, that I used to have something to offer the world." Grace listened with the kind of attention that good librarians, perfect, patient, non-judgmental, focused entirely on understanding rather than formulating responses. When Elijah finished speaking, she was quiet for a moment, processing not just his words, but the transformation she could see in him. "What are you writing?" she asked, nodding toward his notebook. "I'm not sure yet," Elijah admitted. "Maybe a letter, maybe a poem, maybe just trying to capture what it felt like to remember who I used to be before everything fell apart." Grace made a decision that surprised even her. "Elijah, can I ask you something? Would you be interested in sharing your story more widely? Not for publicity or attention, but because I think people need to hear what you have to say about kindness, about how quickly circumstances can change, about what it means to be human." Elijah looked uncertain. "I don't know if anyone would want to hear from someone like me." "Someone like you," Grace repeated. "You mean someone who has experienced loss and hardship and still manages to find hope? Someone who can articulate the complex emotions of being overlooked by society? Someone who understands both the fragility and the resilience of the human spirit?" Elijah, those are exactly the voices people need to hear. While Elijah considered Grace's suggestion, Harper Sullivan was making final edits to the story she had decided to write about the encounter she'd witnessed on Oliver's security footage. She had spent hours crafting the piece, trying to capture not just what had happened, but why it mattered. She had chosen not to sensationalize the story or focus primarily on Dana's celebrity status. Instead, she wrote about the power of human connection, about the way kindness could transform both the giver and the receiver, about the importance of seeing past circumstances to the person underneath. In a world where we often feel divided by politics, economics, and social issues, Harper wrote, sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply recognizing someone else's humanity. Today, security footage captured just such a moment, not between politicians or activists, but between two people who allowed themselves to connect across the artificial barriers that too often keep us apart. Harper included Oliver's observation about what made this interaction different from the thousands of other encounters the cameras captured daily. She wrote about the way both people seemed changed by their brief time together, how genuine compassion had the power to transform ordinary moments into something extraordinary. She did not include Elijah's name or specific personal details, wanting to protect his privacy while still honoring his story. She focused instead on the broader message that everyone has a story worth hearing, that circumstances can change. For anyone, that small acts of kindness can have profound effects. When Harper's story was published online later that evening, it began to spread in ways she hadn't anticipated. The security footage, shared with permission and edited to protect Elijah's identity as much as possible, struck a chord with viewers who were hungry for examples of authentic human connection. The video wasn't slickly produced or accompanied by dramatic music. It was simply two people sitting on a sidewalk, sharing food and conversation, one person offering something precious to another, but in its simplicity lay its power. This was kindness without cameras, compassion without calculation, humanity at its most genuine. Comments began pouring in from people who had been moved by what they witnessed. Teachers shared stories of former students who had fallen on hard times. Social workers talked about the dignity that survived even in the most difficult circumstances. People who had experienced homelessness themselves spoke about what it meant to be seen as a person rather than a problem. But perhaps most significantly, the video began to generate conversations about the systemic issues that could leave a former teacher sitting on a sidewalk, healthcare costs that could bankrupt families, the fragility of employment security, the inadequate safety nets that left people vulnerable when multiple crises converged. Dana, unaware that her private moment of compassion had become public, was at home that evening when her phone began buzzing with notifications. Text messages from friends and colleagues, emails from her professional contacts, social media alerts, all asking about a video that was apparently spreading across the internet. When she finally found and watched the footage, Dana felt a complex mix of emotions. There was some discomfort at having such a personal moment made public without her knowledge, but overwhelmingly, she felt a deep satisfaction that Elijah's dignity had been preserved in how the story was being told, and that the response seemed to be generating meaningful conversations about compassion and social responsibility. Her phone rang, and she saw that it was her producer from the show. "Dana," came the excited voice, "have you seen this video? It's everywhere, and people are calling it one of the most beautiful examples of human kindness they've ever witnessed. The phone hasn't stopped ringing with interview requests." Dana felt that familiar stirring in her spirit, the same feeling she'd had all morning before meeting Elijah. "I'm not interested in interviews about this," she said firmly. "This wasn't done for publicity, and I don't want it turned into a media opportunity." "But Dana, this could be huge for your personal brand." "That's exactly why I won't do interviews about it," Dana interrupted. "The moment this becomes about building my brand or advancing my career, it stops being about what actually happened between two human beings." What Dana didn't know was that Elijah was also learning about the video's spread. Grace had shown him Harper's article on the library's computer, and they had watched together as the view count climbed and comments continued to pour in. "They're talking about you too," Grace pointed out, scrolling through the comments. "People are saying that your dignity and grace in accepting help was just as inspiring as Dana's kindness in offering it." Elijah read over her shoulder, amazed. To see strangers writing about the encounter with such insight and compassion. Many of the comments focused not just on Dana's generosity, but on the way the interaction had been mutual, how both people had given something to the other, how genuine connection required participation from both sides. "Grace," Elijah said, slowly, "maybe you're right about sharing my story, not because of this video, but because people seem ready to listen to different perspectives about what it means to struggle, what it means to receive help, what it means to maintain hope when everything seems lost." Grace smiled, recognizing the teacher that Elijah had once been emerging more clearly. "What would you want to say?" Elijah thought for a moment, his hand resting on the Bible Dana had given him. "I'd want to say that kindness isn't just about helping people. It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that any of us could need help at any time, that receiving grace with dignity is just as important as giving it with love." He paused, then continued, "And I'd want to say that Dana didn't just give me a Bible today. She gave me back a piece of myself that I thought I'd lost forever." As the evening wore on and the video continued to spread, neither Dana nor Elijah realized that their brief encounter on a New York sidewalk was about to change both their lives in ways they never could have imagined. The cameras had captured their moment of connection, but the real story was just beginning to unfold. In living rooms across the country, families were watching the video together and talking about kindness, compassion, and what it meant to see others as fully human. In coffee shops and workplaces, people were sharing their own stories of unexpected grace and discussing how they might be more aware of opportunities to connect with others. The ripple effects of one small act of kindness were spreading far beyond what either Dana or Elijah could have envisioned, proving once again that love shared multiplies rather than diminishes, and that sometimes the most important moments happen when we're not trying to create them. They simply arise from hearts that are open to recognizing the sacred in the ordinary. 3. Weeks after the video first appeared online, Dana was sitting in her dressing room preparing for what had become one of the most requested interviews of her career. She had finally agreed to appear on a morning show, not to talk about herself, but to discuss the broader issues the video had brought to light: homelessness, healthcare costs, and the importance of human dignity in public discourse. The video had been viewed over 15 million times, shared by celebrities, politicians, and ordinary people who found themselves moved by its simple message of compassion. But what surprised Dana most wasn't the attention the video had received. It was how the story had continued to evolve in ways she never could have predicted. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Perino, this is Elijah Vincent." I hope it's okay that I'm texting you. I wanted you to know that something wonderful has happened, and it started with your kindness." Dana's heart skipped as she read the message. She had thought about Elijah countless times over the past 3 weeks, wondering how he was doing, hoping that their encounter had provided some lasting benefit beyond just that one moment of connection. She quickly typed back, "Elijah, I'm so glad to hear from you. Please tell me what's happened." The response came quickly. "Grace Freeman, the librarian I told you about, helped me write an essay about my experience. It was published in the local newspaper, then picked up nationally. I've received dozens of calls from people wanting to share their own stories, and 3 different schools have asked if I'd be interested in substitute teaching positions." Dana felt tears spring to her eyes as she read his words. "That's incredible news. How do you feel about the teaching opportunities?" "Nervous but excited," came his reply. "One of the principals said she remembered my name from years ago. Apparently, I taught her nephew before Emma got sick. She said the essay reminded her why she believed in giving people second chances." What Elijah didn't tell Dana in that text was the full extent of how dramatically his life had changed since their encounter. The essay Grace had helped him craft wasn't just a recounting of receiving Dana's Bible. It was a profound meditation on loss, dignity, redemption, and the thin line between stability and crisis that all humans navigate. The piece, titled "The Weight of Grace," had struck a chord with readers who recognized in Elijah's story their own fears about how quickly life could change, their own struggles with loss and rebuilding, their own need to be seen as more than their worst moments or most difficult circumstances. Dr. Sophia Bennett, the principal who had reached out to Elijah, had indeed remembered him from years earlier. When she read his essay, she was reminded not just of his teaching abilities, but of the compassion and wisdom he had shown with struggling students, qualities that seemed even more pronounced after his own journey through hardship. "Elijah," she had told him during their phone conversation, "I believe that sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest strengths. You've experienced things that most teachers haven't, and that gives you a perspective that could be incredibly valuable to our students." Meanwhile, the video continued to generate responses that surprised everyone involved in sharing it. Viewing parties were being organized in community centers, with people watching together and discussing what they had witnessed. Social workers reported that donations to homeless services had increased dramatically, but more importantly, they noted that the nature of those donations had changed. People were giving not just money, but time, attention, and genuine engagement with the issue. Harper Sullivan, the journalist who had first written about the encounter, found herself inundated with similar stories from around the country. People were sending her videos of their own acts of kindness, stories of encounters that had changed their perspectives, accounts of how the original video had inspired them to see their communities differently. One message particularly moved her. "I work downtown, and I used to hurry past homeless people because I didn't know what to say or do. After watching Dana and Elijah, I realized I don't have to solve anyone's problems, I just have to acknowledge their humanity. Yesterday I stopped and talked to a man I've walked past for months. His name is Logan Brady, and he's a veteran who's struggling with PTSD. We talked for 20 minutes about his service and his love of poetry. I didn't change his circumstances, but he told me it was the first real conversation he'd had in weeks. The ripple effects were spreading in ways that defied measurement. Teachers were using the video in classes about empathy and social responsibility. Church groups were organizing not just to serve meals to homeless individuals, but to sit and eat with them, to listen to their stories, to recognize their full humanity. But perhaps the most significant development was happening in Elijah's own life. The substitute teaching position at Dr. Bennett's school had led to something he hadn't dared hope for, a permanent position teaching English and creative writing to students who, like him, had experienced significant challenges in their lives. Many of his students were from families struggling with poverty, illness, family disruption, or other traumas. His first day back in a classroom after more than a year had been emotional for everyone involved. "I want you to know," he had told his first class, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, "that I understand what it feels like when life doesn't go according to plan. I know what it's like to lose things that matter to you, to wonder if you'll ever find your way back to who you used to be. But I also know that our worst moments don't define us. How we respond to them does." One student, Liam Bennett, had raised his hand tentatively. "Mr. Vincent, are you the teacher from the video? The one who met Dana Perino?" Elijah had nodded, wondering how his students would react to knowing about his recent homelessness. "My mom showed me that video," Liam continued. "She said it was about how everyone has a story worth hearing. Is that true?" "Absolutely true," Elijah had replied. "Every single person in this room has experiences, insights, and wisdom that matter. Part of what we'll do this year is help you find ways to share those stories with the world." As the weeks passed, Elijah's classroom became a place where students felt safe to share their own struggles and triumphs. The Bible Dana had given him sat on his desk, not as a religious symbol, but as a reminder of the transformative power of unexpected grace and the importance of maintaining hope even in difficult circumstances. His students began writing essays about their own experiences. With kindness received and given, they explored themes of resilience, community, and the way small gestures could create significant change. Several of their pieces were selected for publication in the school's literary magazine, and one student's essay about her family's experience with homelessness was picked up by a national publication. Dana, meanwhile, had been quietly following the developments in Elijah's life through their occasional text exchanges. She had also been contacted by dozens of organizations wanting her to speak about compassion, social responsibility, and the power of individual action to create change. One invitation particularly intrigued her, a request to speak at a conference for educators about the role of empathy in teaching. The organizers had specifically mentioned that they hoped she and Elijah might consider appearing together to discuss their encounter from both perspectives and to explore what it revealed about human connection across different circumstances. When Dana reached out to Elijah about the possibility, his response was immediate and enthusiastic. "I'd be honored to appear with you. I think we could share something important about how kindness works both ways, how receiving grace with dignity is just as meaningful as giving it with love." The conference, held 2 months after their initial meeting, brought together educators from across the country who were grappling with how to teach empathy and social responsibility in an increasingly divided world. Dana and Elijah's joint presentation became the highlight of the event. Standing together on stage, Dana in her professional attire, Elijah in the new suit he'd been able to purchase with his first teaching paycheck. They told their story not as a feel-good anecdote, but as an example of what becomes possible when people choose to see beyond surface circumstances to the humanity underneath. "What struck me most about our encounter," Dana told the audience, "wasn't that I gave Elijah something. It was that we gave each other something. He reminded me why I went into public service in the first place, not for the recognition or the career advancement, but for the chance to connect with real people facing real challenges." Elijah nodded, then addressed the educators directly. "Every student who walks into your classroom is carrying a story. Some of those stories include trauma, loss, family struggles, economic hardship. But those same stories also include resilience, creativity, wisdom, and hope. When we see our students, all our students, as complete human beings with valuable perspectives, we create the possibility for real learning to happen. During the question and answer session, one teacher asked how their experience had changed their perspectives on social issues like homelessness and poverty. "It made me realize," Dana replied, "that these aren't abstract policy issues. They're human realities that could affect any of us. When we talk about healthcare costs or housing affordability or employment security, we're talking about real people who could be our neighbors, our former colleagues, our family members." Elijah added, "And it taught me that receiving help doesn't diminish your dignity if you accept it with grace and use it to rebuild not just your own life, but your capacity to help others. The goal isn't just to get back to where you were. It's to use your experience to make things better for the next person who faces similar challenges." After the conference, Dana and Elijah maintained their friendship, checking in with each other regularly and collaborating on occasional speaking engagements about compassion, resilience, and social responsibility. Elijah's classroom continued to be a place where students learned not just about literature and writing, but about the power of their own voices and stories. The original video, meanwhile, had become something of a touchstone for discussions about kindness and human connection. It was studied in sociology classes, referenced in sermons, and shared in corporate training sessions about empathy and leadership. But perhaps its most important impact was the quieter one. The countless individual moments it had inspired when people chose to see past circumstances to the person underneath, when they offered kindness without expecting anything in return, when they allowed themselves to be changed by encounters with others who were different from themselves. 6 months after their first meeting, Dana received a package in the mail from Elijah. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal and a note. "Dana, this journal contains some of the essays my students have written about kindness, grace, and second chances. I thought you might like to see how your simple act of compassion has multiplied. Through the lives of these young people, they understand now that everyone has a story worth hearing, and that the smallest gestures can create the biggest changes. Thank you for reminding all of us that love shared doesn't diminish, it multiplies." As Dana read through the students' essays that evening, she was struck by the wisdom and insight of these young people who had learned to see their own struggles as sources of strength rather than shame. They wrote about family members who had overcome addiction, about grandparents who had immigrated with nothing and built new lives, about their own journeys through foster care or poverty or illness. But more than that, they wrote about how they planned to use their experiences to help others through teaching, social work, medicine, advocacy, or simply by being the kind of people who saw others as fully human, regardless of their circumstances. The last essay in the journal was written by Liam Bennett, the student who had first asked Elijah about the video. It was titled "The Ripple Effect of One Bible," and it traced the journey from Dana's grandmother, who had first owned the Bible, through Dana's years of carrying it, to Elijah's receiving it, to the classroom where it now sat as a symbol of hope and transformation. "Sometimes," Liam had written, "the most important things in life are the ones that get passed from person to person, carrying love and wisdom from one generation to the next." That Bible didn't just change Mr. Vincent's life, it changed all of ours, because it reminded us that every person we meet is carrying something precious, and every interaction we have is a chance to either honor that preciousness or ignore it. I want to spend my life honoring it. Dana closed the journal and sat quietly in her living room, thinking about her grandmother, about the values she had tried to instill, about the way love and kindness could travel through time and across circumstances, to touch lives in ways the original giver never could have imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elijah. Thank you for seeing me as more than my circumstances. Thank you for reminding me that I was still worthy of kindness. Thank you for showing me that grace received with dignity can become grace multiplied beyond measure. Dana typed back, "Thank you for reminding me what really matters. Thank you for showing me that kindness works both ways. Thank you for proving that the most important moments often happen when we're not trying to create them. They arise from hearts that are simply open to recognizing the sacred in the ordinary." As she prepared for bed that night, Dana thought about all the lives that had been touched by one simple decision to share lunch with a stranger, to offer something precious to someone who needed it, to choose connection over separation. The ripple effects were still spreading, would continue spreading, in ways that neither she nor Elijah would ever fully know. But that was perhaps the most beautiful part of the story. That genuine kindness didn't require recognition or measurement to be meaningful. It simply required hearts willing to see beyond surface circumstances to the humanity underneath, and the courage to act on that recognition with love. In classrooms and coffee shops, in boardrooms and community centers, in quiet moments between strangers and intimate conversations between friends, the message continued to spread. Every person has a story worth hearing. Every act of kindness has the potential to transform lives. And the smallest gestures can create the biggest changes when they come from hearts that recognize the fundamental truth that we are all connected, all worthy of dignity, all capable of both giving and receiving grace. The cameras had captured one moment of human connection, but the real story was written in the countless lives that were changed by choosing to see that moment not as an isolated incident, but as an invitation to live with greater compassion, deeper empathy, and more open hearts.